You're live.
Good evening and welcome to the Scottsdale Historic Preservation Commission meeting. The purpose of the Historic Preservation Commission, in part, is to establish standards necessary to preserve the historic character of resources designated historic, develop, maintain, and from time to time amend plans for the preservation of resources of historic significance in the city, and review proposed alterations to historic and archaeological resources through the Certificate of Appropriateness process. The agenda consists of the roll call, administrative report, minutes approval of the prior meeting, the regular agenda, non-action items. No vote will be made by the commission. Citizens wishing to speak on any agenda item may fill out a blue speaker card, or if not willing to speak, may fill out a yellow comment card and turn it in at the staff table before the agenda item is to be discussed. You will be called by name when it is your turn to speak. When called, come to the table, state your name and address, and then begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent the views of the group. To facilitate the meeting, your comment will be limited to 3 minutes for individual speakers, 1 additional minute for each additional individual present at the meeting who has contributed their time to a representative speaker, up to 10 minutes. Please format your speech to be accommodated within the applicable time frame given. I remind our audience that the review relates to historic preservation matters and does not include consideration of existing zoning district designations, zoning entitlements, or the allowed uses within the zoning districts. After the public comments have ended, the applicant may have up to 5 minutes to respond to the public comments. The commission's motion may be to approve with modified stipulations, to deny the request, or to continue the case. Thank you for your interest and time. Now we begin the meeting with the roll call.
Vice Chair Linda Davis. Absent. Commissioner Ben Brousseau.
Present.
Commissioner John Griffin.
Present.
Commissioner Peter Hosmer.
Present.
Commissioner Courtney Lodge.
Present.
And Commissioner Rose Smith.
Present.
We have a quorum with 5 present and 1 absent.
The first action of the commission will be the administrative report by Jesus Murillo.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Smith. And first of all, good evening and a happy new year to you all. Thank you for being here tonight. First of all, I would like to congratulate Commissioner Hosmer for his second round on the commission. Commissioner, would you like to give any words?
None other than I appreciate being on the board and hopefully I'm a good contribution. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And then also we have the honor of having a new commissioner with us, and I would like to congratulate and welcome Commissioner Griffin. Would you like to speak a few words as well?
Thank you. I look forward to helping the city and the constituents of this town to make this a beautiful area that we live in.
If you would like me to give the presentation as a whole, I can do that as well. I leave that up to the commission. And also on the agenda for item number 5 is the election of officers. Just a suggestion, some boards do decide to not elect the chair and vice chair for the commission until everyone's present. I leave that up to the commission to make that decision tonight. So that ends staff's administrative report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Are you going to proceed with the
Yes, Chair Smith, if you would like. If for item 3, the commission doesn't have any comments, we can move on to item number 4.
Does anyone on the commission have any comments on the annual report as presented by Mr. Murillo?
Commissioner Hosmer does not. We skipped over the approval of the meeting minutes.
Oh, good call. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the prior meeting?
This is Commissioner Hosmer. I'll make a motion to approve the December 2nd, 2021 meeting minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. So the minutes from the December 2nd, 2021 meeting has been approved.
Chair Smith, if I may, if we could have a roll call for the
Oh,
votes.
okay. Could we have a roll call?
Vice Chair Linda Davis, absent. Commissioner Ben Brousseau,
Present.
Commissioner John Griffin,
Present.
Commissioner Peter Hosmer, Commissioner Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Courtney Lodge,
Present.
and Commissioner Rose Smith.
Yes.
Motion
If I
passes.
may, I think with the motion, the idea is that it's to approve, not necessarily to acknowledge your presence.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
The motion passes.
Okay, so now we move on to regular agenda item number 3. Would anyone in the commission have any questions for Mr. Murillo regarding the 2021 Historic Preservation Commission Annual Report?
None found by Commissioner Hosmer.
Hearing none, can we make a motion to approve agenda item number 3? I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
I'll
that motion.
second that.
Thank you. And the roll call?
Vice Chair Linda Davis is absent. Commissioner Ben Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner John Griffin,
Approve.
Commissioner Peter Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Courtney Lodge,
Yes.
and Commissioner Rose Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. On to regular agenda item number 4, the HERA program funding memo. This is to review, discussion, and possible action on the historic residential exterior rehabilitation, or HRER, program funding requirements, guidelines, and windows policy. Does anyone have any discussion on agenda item number 4?
Chair Smith, if I may, would you
yes.
like me to give a presentation first in total, in sections, or would you like me to take questions first?
I have a few questions I'd just like to get right out of the chute with,
Sounds
if
good.
that's all right. All righty, thank you. Okay. On page number 1 of 6, attachment number 1. I was wondering, I was thinking that we at some point put in provisions that properties were to be capped at a certain amount per property. Was that added anywhere? Remember when we talked about the amount per property would be capped at a certain amount? Did we make that clear anywhere
So,
by the address?
So Chair Smith, yes, there was a couple different elements that had been discussed when it came to the capping, and the commission had directed staff to bring back what the official directive was, and then make those changes, and then the commission was going to decide whether that was going to be what they were going to go with or decide on a different amount.
Okay, so were those changes made in here or were they identified anywhere in this document?
Yes, and and if you'd like, I can start with that portion of the presentation.
Okay, does anybody have a problem with that? Thank you, Mr. Murillo.
No, my pleasure. So, in order, I think, to help explain how we arrived to the items that you have in the attachments, the commission did, I think, a good job of asking staff the questions needed to understand how we got to this point. And so this first slide kind of goes over some of those elements, and I'm hoping that this will help the discussion for the HRER funding forms. So first of all, the council approved the HRER funding back in 2006. And jumping ahead to to the last bullet point, in 2006, the amount that was capped for each individual single-family home was $10,000. And then sometime in 2007, the policy from the commission was that it was $7,500 that would be limited to each of the individual single-family homes. This commission had discussed the potential of $5,000, and so again, staff is willing to have that discussion and take direction on that. But as far as the document that we have now, it was incorrect in stating the 75. That can be a policy discussion, but as far as how it reads in the document, the discussion at least is currently $10,000. There's language that you can provide to staff to say, yes, that is the official amount, but for the time being, you can choose another amount. But at least officially, to make this document be correct with the current resolution, the amount is $10,000. Yes, and I will get to, I have blown it up for everyone to see it in the presentation. So,
Okay, I see that up to $10,000, but I don't see where it says per property as far as a lifetime allotment.
that was in the resolution, and so the resolution number 6860 is where it contains all the official language to that.
Okay,
And in fact, the first resolution that dedicated the HRER funding, that same night dedicated the first funds to the first project, and that was at $5,000. So it did all, the resolution 6860 also mentioned that there was going to be a one-time dedication of funds. That's where staff got that information from. And it was a one-time funding. So since then, there hasn't been added to, at least by the city council. And once the funds depleted, that was going to be the end of the funds. But since then, there have been a couple projects that have come through that through a development agreement, or in the example of Hotel Valley Ho, which was resolution 6399, with the approval of the development of that project or revamping of that project, they committed to giving $10,000 a year for 20 years to the program. So even though there was a one-time cap from the council, there were a couple projects that throughout the years that have fed into that program. Staff right now is working on making sure I can consolidate what those numbers are. Since the last hearing, we didn't have enough time to make sure we gave you good and complete information, so we're still working on that. But that's how, since the inception of the project, that's how it has been moving forward. So up to this point, it stays within that account, and it naturally rolls over. So there's no, there was discussion about possibly creating a fund if the fundings, or a bond if the funds were being lost. And so staff's analysis showed that you don't have to, because it stays into that, it stays in that account until used by the commission.
thank you.
So
And
if I may, Mr. Murillo, Peter Hosmer, I think the last time we spoke, we were interested in what the rollover, what the amount is in total. I think the concern I had was you could take one project and it could deplete a tremendous amount of the money in reserve, and it should be best served to serve the most amount of people. So understanding what the kitty is, and say, for example, how much money annually we've spent on the funding, so we can get a sense of how to balance it for the most, the most effective use to the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Smith and Commissioner Hosmer. That is the information that staff is currently working on. We know what the numbers are, but we've been going through and trying to figure out how many projects have been approved and are currently in the pipeline so that we can make finalize those numbers. We also are trying to find out any projects that are currently feeding so that we can also give an indication of what happens in the future and what that amount will be, how it will grow, if any. I know that for the example of the Hotel Valley Ho, there are still 3 years left, so that's at least $30,000 that will be added to the account. So we are finalizing those numbers for the commission. We just want to make sure that those numbers are correct. So I'd rather come here, give the information that I know was secure, and then update the information at a later date for you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Hosmer?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So going on to the next slide, and we're about to go through the documents that make up the funding and how that happens, so that then we can go into the changes that were made into the document. So what you will notice that when someone gets the approval from the commission and then is now going to go through the process to be able to get the funding, that process is broken up into about three different sections. The first one is there's a program agreement, which is part of your attachments. And that is the first document that the owner must read, agree with, and sign in order for the city to continue the process. And I'll have some examples of that also on the screen, small, but they're in there. That's why we have it electronically for the commission. And once that is signed and recorded, the next important document is going to be the deed of conservation. And I'll provide some more information on when we get to the specifics of the deed. And then once the deed has been established and recorded, then we put that together with, and I'll have later the example of the checklist. We put together the rest of the materials in the checklist, and that goes one package. Once that's all been put together, that's when the owner is awarded the funding, and we'll go through that a little deeper. I think that as I go through the presentation, there were some questions that the commission had of staff that I think right now is a good time to bring up, because I think it'll hopefully, one, answer the question, and two, be in the back of the minds as we're discussing the actual HRER funding materials. The first one was that there was some discussion about additions in the rear, and staff went through the analysis of the funding and those guidelines and what goes into those. And through discussions with our attorneys, it was found that yes, the commission can fund additions in the rear if the commission so chose to, but it wasn't required to fund them. And if the commission, based off of the last conversation, stated that they wanted to take a policy direction, that that's not where they wanted the funding to go, the commission could, as a policy, give that direction to staff. Also, there was some discussion about the easement location. I know that some people had heard that the easement was just dedicated over the facade. And so staff went through and with the attorneys, and we read the language, and it was found that the easement is actually dedicated over the entire property, not just over the facade. It's just that the deed of conservation does such a good job of mentioning facade so many times and focusing on the facade that is, I think, where some of those ideas came from. But the easement isn't for the entire property. It's just that the specific language focuses on the facade. And the commission had also made statements that maybe they were going to direct staff to have conversations with applicants that the funding was going to be more for hardships and maybe shouldn't include it in addition if the addition necessarily wasn't a hardship for the applicant. So those are some of the comments that the commission made that I think were important to mention now as we move forward for possible direction for staff on the HRER funding documents themselves. Any questions from the commission so far? Okay, going on to the next slide. So as you can see here, this is
Excuse me, Mr. Murillo, Peter Hosmer, could you go back to the last slide? One of the comments I wanted to make about the funding to the back of a building, and at least from what I recalled from the discussions, my interest in that was that funding something that isn't to the pleasure of the community, that's just to the backyard, is not so important to fund under HRER. It wasn't a question of required or not required to fund. It was more that you're not required to do historical embellishments or corrections to the back of the property or the sides of the property. So if the homeowner asks for funding for the entire parcel, including the back of the building, the community would expect it to match and look historic. And if they're not required to do that, why should they get paid for it? And I think in the conclusion was, at least in my opinion, we should not be funding things that are not in public view that we typically have jurisdiction over. And Mr. Brousseau, you might want to chime in as to your recollection as well. Thank you.
Yes, Peter, remind me what recollection are we going to expand upon here? Excuse me.
Well, my concern was, again, that we don't, because the way the rules are written, if you're replacing windows, you
right.
only have to make them match the historical criteria on the front facade.
Right.
So if you're going to replace all the windows on the backside of your house, the backside of the house should not be getting HRER funding. And this is partly because it's not appropriate, but secondly, because it's just using up the funds that could be used for people that are going to do the front of their house, and we don't want to dry the fund up.
Agreed. Yes.
So, Mr. Murillo, is that, does that help as a correction to that understanding, or did I miss something? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Smith and Commissioner Hosmer. That was the understanding of staff. Staff consolidated that comment from staff's notes a couple times. The reason staff brought it up is that the commission hadn't made particular change to the language that solidified that. And so staff was bringing that again to the commission so that maybe for this time, there was language specific to that change in the HRER program.
Does that answer your question, Peter? Commissioner Hosmer?
Commissioner Hosmer, I would like to see something specific written that it does not allow for HRER funding to the areas that the Historic Preservation Commission are not under jurisdiction for.
So Commissioner Hosmer, how would you include an addition that is within line of sight, such as on a corner home?
Yes. Now, because this sounds like somebody would get funded for doing something at the back of the building, but not necessarily making it historically correct.
Recording in progress.
So can I suggest that, Mr. Murillo, that you come back with some language that addresses Commissioner Hosmer's his concerns about the addition being clear, or do we want to talk about the addition piece? Do we want to fund additions that are not within the line of sight of the front of the house? Do we have any thoughts on that? Mr. Murillo?
Yes, Chair Smith. I definitely, we do want to do that. There is a part in the presentation where I go over the changes that were made directly from the notes given. And if we want to add the language there, I think that'd be a great place to
Well,
do
then
it.
take it away, Mr. Murillo.
Perfect, thank you. So again, this is an example of the program that the applicant would first sign that would allow us to continue on to the next step. And in your packet, you also saw the actual language in the deed itself. And so this is where it does identify that the easement is over the entire property, but just has many focuses on the facade. The attorneys did feel that there was a way to amend this document if you wanted to do so in that manner. And then this is a list of the remaining documents that the applicant would have to produce before receiving fundings approved by the commission for HRER rehabilitation. So now we can get into that portion of the document. Again, just for the sake of help me explaining how the changes were made. Anything just in plain bold were the comments that were added from the November 4th meeting. And the strike through was the language that was removed also from the November 4th meeting. And then anything that was bolded and underlined was language that the commission added at the December 2nd hearing. And anything that was had a double strike through was language that was removed from the December 2nd meeting. And I think at some point in time, I will, with the permission of the commission, make some of the language normal because I'm running out of fonts to use to decipher between those. I can color code if needed, but I wanted to make sure that I made that distinction now. And it also will remain true for the window policy itself. So the first change that staff made for it was, again, as far as the document was now and making it first be consistent with what the resolution said, staff did add the $10,000 as the official amount. But this paragraph can be amended as a policy to acknowledge the $10,000, but yet set a cap by the commission for an amount seen fit by the commission, which I believe the popular amount was $5,000 from the last hearing. So again, you have the entire document, so we don't have to limit the conversation to just this paragraph. But because of the last hearing, I at least wanted to enlarge those sections where the comments and changes were made so that everyone could see it clearly. But the whole document's there, so we can still discuss the whole document if you'd like to. This is just that paragraph from page 1 of 6, where there was direction from the commission for staff to make that change.
Did you want us to discuss each item now while the slide is up?
If it pleased, Chair Smith, if it pleased the commission, we can stick with page 1 and go through that way, but at least this was the change that was made from the previous
Okay,
hearing.
this is where I would like to have seen the stipulation and a reference or somewhere that shows that city will only cover a set property. I think it should be right up front that each individual home is capped at a certain amount and a resource of where they can go look that up to see if, they might buy a house thinking they can get matching funds or $10,000 or whatever for it, only to find out that has already previously been allotted to that address and there is no more funds available. I'm hoping that is stipulated right up front so people know where to look and they know what their expectations would be, if that's possible.
Yes, Chair Smith, thank you for that. Part of the discussion that I had during this last month was with our GIS department. And there's an ability for us to be able to flag certain properties based off of whatever we feel is important to know about that property. I suggested having our own map on the side where we would go through and we would identify all the properties that have received funding and the amounts. Then this way, if anyone came to the front counter to ask a question, as soon as the planner or whoever would be helping would go to that property, there'd be an identifier there, they'd click on it, and the first thing that would come up is the amount that this property has received. To again, if someone has already received the $10,000, we say, hey, just if you choose to go through this process, there's no funding available. And if they receive 5, we say, look, that's what's been capped, but because the resolution does allow for 10, it's up to you if you would like to go to the commission and seek additional funding. But that is one of the steps that we'll be taking to, like you said, at the forefront, try to identify to the single or to the owner.
And can we put that in the document somewhere up front so they know before they go through the process and come to the counter? So they'll be able to check in advance what their property or know who to call to find out if their property has already been allotted funds?
Yes, Chair Smith, I think.
Or even just a click on a hyperlink?
Yes, Chair Smith, I think that we could probably, the hyperlinks we've found in the past that as the link changes, sometimes it's not the easiest, but I think if we identify that as part of this application, the first step for the owner is to figure out whether funds have been, and then contacting the historic preservation officer for that. That way, if the role changes, that position will always be there, and that's who they can contact to do that analysis.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Are there any other comments for page 1?
Yes. The bullet points, the two added things about the concrete drives, those stipulations, right there you go. Either they match or they don't, but they don't match. Either we are going to say twice that concrete drives, decorative pavers, walkways, patios of significant to historic importance, or that they will not be eligible. I mean, which one are we going to do?
Yeah, so Chair Smith, that is a great point. As I was going through my notes, I noticed that the vote was kind of splitting it. So I put it up as one, and I will strike out whichever portion you did, because there was comments that said that the funding should only be for those things that were significantly important. But part of the discussion said that that some commissioners felt that maybe it was okay, others felt not, and there was some good discussions about how quickly the slab could stick around and whether the slab's what made it important or not. On this one, I went ahead and put it in this way to remind the conversation, but staff would love some direction on which of these you would like to continue
Is
with.
that something you'd like us to discuss now?
Yes, please.
Would anyone like to entertain any concerns or comments on the two new language bullet points there that were added on regarding concrete drives, et cetera?
This is Commissioner Hosmer. I think decorative pavers have never been one of my favorites in a historic neighborhood because it takes a whole different context. Walkways and patios might be a little bit minuscule for the discussion. I think concrete drives might make a little bit more importance. But I think as your suggestion, Commissioner Smith, was good, that if the applicant knows up front that there's a vetting process and you have to go through that with staff to have them go through the checklist that says it doesn't apply here or your funds are used up or whatever, they do need to know that that's a possibility. They need to basically be checked off and cleared to proceed after that. So anyway, I don't know if anybody has any other comments about the concrete drives, decorative pavers, walkways, etc., to give the group that haven't been on the commission a while. Villa Monterey has been doing a lot of decorative pavers, and not to the favor of most of the commission, because some of them slipped through the cracks, and literally some people are adamant that this is the only way to cost effectively repair their driveways. So because I don't think, and I think I'd like to propose that in our future language for other historic districts, aside from Villa Monterey, I'd like to see decorative pavers removed as an alternate to fixing driveways, for the mere reason that it's not in a historic context. If it were old cobblestone or brick and the neighborhood was built that way, it would be acceptable. But I think in this context, it's not. But I think concrete driveways should be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, if that helps. Thank you.
May I add a comment also? Thank you, Commissioner Hosmer. I would like to suggest perhaps that we remove decorative pavers from the line altogether and put concrete drives, walkways, patios, if significant to historic importance. Because I do agree that some of the patios and walkways are historically important. But if decorative pavers are going to be an issue, I don't know why we couldn't just take that out of the guaranteed HRER funding. Any other thoughts?
And I would agree. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Griffin. Wouldn't the patios be under a different section? Concrete drives, walkways are all concrete based, flat surface. So what was the definition of a patio?
It's my understanding, and maybe Commissioner Brousseau can extrapolate on this. I think some of the historic homes have front patios. Am I wrong on that?
This has been Brousseau. I think what we're talking about in this part are the patios that sort of like showed up overnight. Some people had gone in to the city to apply for permits to add a little patio to the front of their properties. And while many of them were denied, many of them just didn't come to the city at all. And so over the course of time, it was realized that several of the Villa Monterey patio homes have magically now patios in the front, along with pony walls and things that chip away at the, historical integrity of the properties themselves as a larger picture. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Commissioner Hosmer, as you guys are both the senior members here, maybe you can kind of let us newbies know how you weigh in on that piece about the concrete drives, decorative. If we take out decorative pavers, would it suffice to have concrete drives, walkways, patios, if significant to historic importance, just left alone that way? Or should we stipulate patios if they're within the front of the home or within the line of sight? Do we want to go that far?
Sorry to jump in. It's Commissioner Brousseau. There were no patios on any of those homes to begin with. So there shouldn't, this is the tricky part, right?
Yeah,
Figuring out how we're
this is Commissioner Hosmer. I agree with Ben. I think the issue about the patios is that Villa Monterey has made so many anomalies that it's been hard to police because our commission adopted from the previous commission. And there are things that I think that they have done over time that were either under the radar or not necessarily legally, technically. So I think the patio thing takes a proportion, a vision, and a total look that's not in the historic context. So patios should probably be excluded from this, as decorative pavers would be. I think when you look at walkways, if you had a 4-foot walkway meandering up to your door historically, and you wanted to remodel that, replace it, but do it in the same materials, I think it's appropriate to get funding for it to clean it up or make it, or to repair it. But if you're going to add a front walkway that wasn't there originally, you're now dividing the front lawn up, or your front, appearance up, and I don't think it's necessarily appropriate. So I think we strike decorative pavers and patios and leave the if significant to historic homes. So in other words, you can't build a historic looking patio when one never existed. Thank you.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Griffin, could you put patios under porches also? Because they're both synonymous with front of house.
Chair Smith and Commissioner Griffin, we could, especially if that was the direction of the commission. The reason I think right now they're separated is because the underlying zoning for the ordinance separates them, because you can do different things with the patio than you can with the porch, at least as per ordinance. I think that's the initial reason why they were separated. But if the commission wanted to view those as one element, they could.
Do we have any, this is Commissioner Smith, do we have any historical or pending historical neighborhoods that include front patios or that you know of? I'm trying to think.
What about the homes near El Dorado? Aren't those have patios? because I have a friend that lives on that street and there's patios. Most of them have front patios. And those are, yeah, you know what I mean by El Dorado Park? Yeah, that whole area, there's several homes. I mean, majority of them have front patios that are built. They've got to, I mean, they've got to be historic. I don't know what date. Yeah, but they're, what's the date that it's marked? I don't know what date they're built, but they definitely have front patios and they're definitely,
Is there a caveat that says that if homeowners have questions, they can bring it individually to the commission? And
Chair-
if we strike those two pieces and then we come to find out that there is a patio or some other area of a front yard that is historic, how would that be handled?
So Chair Smith, first of all, I appreciate the question because as I'll touch at the very end of the conversation, when I'm touching about some of the other questions that the commission had for staff, we are going to discuss very briefly the sunset review that's going to be done. And because that's allowed staff to compare the commission with the other commissions, make sure we're all on the same page. And as part of that, there is an element to normally these meetings where it does allow the opportunity for someone to have that. And so we'll be discussing that later once we want to have the discussion happen once the sunset review has been completed so we can include all the findings. But it's encouraging to me that yes, some other commissions do have an element where someone can come in as a non-action item and get feedback from a commission. There's also, again, staff's also always open for you giving us direction and us having those conversations at the time of a pre-application, saying, hey, look, this is where things are going, and you might want to consider or not consider this. But part of that discussion will be making a portion of the meeting available to something like that.
Thank you. Any other comment on that piece, or Commissioner Hosmer, do you have any other comments on that piece?
Yes, I do. And I appreciate the back and forth discussion because it sort of made me recall that Sands North probably has entry exterior patios off the front. And I think maybe what we're trying to say is if it's original to the structure, you could consider funding. But if you're going to add decorative pavers or going to add a patio, that's not appropriate. So I think that might not even be necessary to speak of, because if it doesn't get approved by the commission to even be installed, then who cares about the HRER funding? So I think decorative pavers is probably inappropriate just because that's not in the historic character. I think what we need to think is if there was something built in 1950 that had an incredible paving pattern walking up to the house, we would certainly want them to restore it as is, and they could get HRER funding for it. But I think when we had this initial discussion, we were afraid that people would try to get enhancements to their house and get it funded. And I think, and I looked to Ben to see if you recall that that's kind of the flavor of what we're looking for. Thank you.
It's Commissioner Brousseau. Yes, agreed. I see what you're going for.
So I believe it looks like we are just striking decorative pavers. Am I correct there?
Chair Smith, staff currently has decorative pavers and patios.
Patios.
Yes.
And I think we are possibly backing off of patios and leaving and just crossing out decorative pavers as a for sure. Is anybody else read that differently?
This is Commissioner Hosmer again. I guess I'm wondering if this is getting into the weeds by being that specific, because obviously every site is different. And there are some homes that we probably haven't looked at the front yards specifically to know how they're being addressed. I think, as you know, as just mentioning to Ben, my recall was we just wanted to be assured that funding doesn't apply to new enhancements that were not historically involved in the project originally. So I'm okay with getting rid of decorative pavers, but I'm wondering if we're just giving them too many details here. Like, do we go into trim and talk about all the different types of trim? I think if it's not historic and it's not approved by HPC, it shouldn't get the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hosmer and Chair Smith. Staff then would, in the event that the conversation went this way, staff was going to suggest on that second comment, was there something that, like, for example, in this instance, with the conversation going the way it did, should it exclude everything but decorative pavers shall not be eligible for HRER funding? I didn't know if you actually wanted to then repeat it down here, whether they were eligible or not, or whether just the omission of it not being included on what is allowed was enough.
I believe this is Commissioner Smith. I think it's confusing to have both of them. That's just my opinion. Anyone else?
I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Commissioner Hosmer. So I think we can direct staff to strike that second bit of new language.
Chair Smith noted.
Thank you.
And so staff has included on this next slide, the changes made from, these are all from the November 4th discussion. There were no changes made from the December 2nd discussion to this page, but staff is still open to any further discussions or changes that the commission would like to make at this time, if any. Going on to page 3 of 6, the area that you see underlined there and bolded is what was added from the last discussion. And this is where we had a discussion with our attorneys as they read the language in case it was to the liking of the commission. They suggested that this language pretty much read very similar to what it is now, but include almost in a way of, and we didn't finalize the language, we didn't have time in order for the meeting, but they almost want to say it, what I kept coming to them almost was in the reverse and saying, it's almost for them more appropriate for the language if you choose an amount that over that amount must require there to be some, to have a licensed contractor versus capping it and going the other way. And so that was just a suggestion that said this could potentially, this would work, but what some of the legal advice was potentially using an amount saying from this amount on up requires a, or maybe having the amount be between two numbers. And so they said it worked, but their suggestion was that we could always change the language a bit. And I asked them, they knew when the hearing was, we're really busy, but they said they'd have it to me by the next time. So I'll provide that language then, but I just wanted to notify you that there is some language we're working on for this specific portion of the document.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Smith. Was anyone able to check into that ARS 32-1121? And I emailed that because if you look up that provision, it seems to indicate that state statute says it has to be $1,000. Did anyone look that up?
Chair Smith, yes. And that is where the language, that is where the suggestion came from the attorney's office.
Okay.
So they are finalizing the language for that. Again, even after reviewing the ARS, they felt that that as written now would work, but they're working on language that they think might make it a little stronger.
Okay.
And that is what I will
So we're
incorporate the
not
next time.
going outside of the ARS because it originally said 1,000
Correct.
and then we changed it to 5,000. But if the ARS says 1,000, there's not a conflict there?
So the discussion we've been having with the attorneys is whether the municipality can be more restrictive versus less.
Okay.
That's the discussion. And normally when there's an ordinance that's from a larger entity, federal to state, state to municipal. The lower quote unquote ranking entity cannot be more liberal than the larger
Right,
ranking
and that's what
entity,
we're
but
doing
they
here,
can be
right?
more conservative. Now,
But we're being more liberal.
correct. And that's why they're working on the language to see if there's a way to be more liberal without necessarily compromising what the ARS says. And
Okay.
so as soon as I have that language for you, but they said for tonight, we can proceed with this and they'll update me with that language.
Is there any other comment on this piece? Commissioner Hosmer?
I have none.
And this skips over to page 5, but again, staff is here in case the commission would like to make any different changes or have a discussion on page 4 before we jump here. Okay, seeing that-
Peter Hosmer again. Back on page 3. No, I'm sorry. I think the graphics are correct. I was just looking at some things that were striked that were a little confusing. So I'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this is where staff went through and made the, forgive me, it looks more like a bar, but those are double strike throughs where the word facade was being removed as directed by the commission. Both staff and the attorneys felt comfortable with the change. And again, just to confirm that the easement isn't over just the facade as previously thought, it is over the entire property. And yes, those were the last changes to that document. And again, the rules are going to be exactly the same for the Windows policy portion of the review. I'll go on to and there was only one change that the commission had suggested for staff on this document. But again, the document is, if you wanted to discuss any other portions, you could. And so the change was made that for all windows visible from the street, replacement windows must match the existing Muntin structure.
Mr. Murillo, Peter Hosmer. I'm just thinking about how homeowners might interpret this, and we don't want to frighten them too much. If you have a fence that separates the front yard from the backyard, and there's a window that is at 7 feet, but the wall to your backyard is at 6 feet, I would not constitute that as visible from the street. So I don't know if we want to change the language to be a little bit more specific, because I've always been a proponent of making things as clear as possible so that it's not subject to interpretation. Visible from the street would be a full-size window visible from the street, whether it's on the side or the front. And it would be, in my view, up to the wall to the backyard if there is one there. Now, if there is not a wall there and you can see all the way to the back of the house, then I would see that as visible from the street. If anybody has any suggestions on language, I'm welcome.
Chair Smith and Commissioner Hosmer, please, we're willing to listen to any language. If I may, they'll make a suggestion. When it comes to our lighting ordinance, when the ordinance regulates how light is being measured at the property line, it is given at a 6-foot height, assuming that there's going to be a wall at a minimum, typical 6-foot wall, and therefore we don't take the measurement of whatever the light would be at the property line on the ground, but what that would be at what's considered viewable from the street. So that's just one suggestion that staff has, where we've gotten a little more specific about where a measurement is taken.
This is Commissioner Smith. I happen to be okay with the language as it is, because the windows are a permanent part of the structure and the wall is not. And that's why I feel that it is appropriate as written. Any other comments?
Well, this is Commissioner Hosmer again. I agree. I think that makes sense to leave it. I think the other thing is that we need to consider is that we're still going to review these. This case will still come before us, so we have the option of helping define what we mean by visible from the street if it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hosmer.
Chair Smith noted, and I'll go on to the next point. This will conclude the comments and the analysis that was done for the documents. And so this is some more of the information that was requested by the commission. And so staff has either completely or in part have found responses to these. So again, as we discussed before, that additions in the rear are allowable, but the commission has stated that they're not preferred. And as staff wanted to confirm that that is the discussion and direction that they would like staff to have with an applicant at the time that they come in for analysis, or whether it was something that was going to be later solidified in the document another way. And at least right now, staff, we wanted to acknowledge that staff does understand that, and that will be a part of the conversation, regardless of whether a change is made from now until someone coming in for an application. So we wanted to make sure that we echoed that. The second one is that staff will also be encouraging, with the support of the commission, that all building elements that the commission prefers to see all building elements to match regardless of the location. And so staff will definitely make sure that those are comments that are made as we meet with applicants, and that we understand that as well. And then staff did want to jot down, because there was a discussion about, that funding not be used for those elements that were the responsibility of the HOA. And so that's where it could potentially, if there's a part of the meeting where that can be discussed without having to make a vote or decision that night, that could potentially also be a place where these discussions are had. There were discussions about potentially coming up with some guidelines about adequate modifications to other districts. And I remember some of the commissioners were having discussions of possibly coming up with what they felt were appropriate modifications to some guidelines. And staff was just curious if there was further direction on this, or whether there was enough of the discussion to not continue, or whether there was more analysis that you wanted staff to do.
Mr. Murillo, because of the silence, I'm assuming you're wondering if any of us want to chime in on that one. I know there's one district, the Bell Monterey district, the 7 districts. We are, continually working on modifications to work with the neighborhoods to make that work. I don't recall any other districts that we were looking to do the modifications for, other than things that are pet peeves, like decorative paving and the items that you've mentioned up above in the first couple of bullets. If any other commissioners have any comments, I'll welcome those. Thank you.
I'm hearing none.
Forgive me. Chair Smith, staff did mention to our director the wishes of the commission to have some kind of a joint meeting with the city council. And as that discussion develops, I will be updating the commission on how that's going. And then again, staff will update the commission with the results of the analysis of the sunset review. Once that is completed, we just wanted to remind the commission that is on February 22nd. So it'll probably be, we're hoping that we can have enough time from the review to when we would put together the materials for the meeting. If not, then it will show up for the April meeting, depending on the timeline of getting that information posted. But staff did want to, we knew that there had been discussions on what that meant. And so as soon as staff gets the results of that, we'll put together a memo and provide information to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Murillo.
And that concludes staff's presentation. And so we can either go on to the next item, or if there's any finishing thoughts of staff's presentation and what you would like to see for the next time, staff's open.
So, Mr. Murillo, I would then understand that we're going to continue. This would be a continued issue then, before we finalize and approve, because you have some language that you're gonna add. So does this need a motion, or is this, just looking back at the original notes, whether there was supposed to be a decision made on this, or whether we're just listening to your report?
Chair Smith and Commissioner.
Okay, it does say possible action. So do we need to make a motion to continue this HRER funding memo?
Yeah, Chair Smith and Commissioner Hosmer, yes, staff would appreciate a motion to continue this either to the next hearing or to another date that you feel is possible.
Okay, does anyone go ahead?
I'll make a motion to continue the HRER funding with the idea that Mr. Murillo will have adequate time to put the information together. Thank you.
Is there any seconds?
Commissioner Griffin, I second.
We have a roll call on that.
Vice Chair Linda Davis is absent. Commissioner Ben Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner John Griffin,
Yes.
Commissioner Peter Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Courtney Lodge,
Yes.
and Commissioner Rose Smith.
Yes,
Motion passes for continuance.
thank you. The next item on the regular agenda is item number 5, the election of officers for 2022. Staff requests that Historic Preservation Commission elect the chair and vice chair for 2022. We're all pretty new, or half of us are pretty new. Do we want to, how do we want to approach this? Commissioners Hosmer and Brousseau, how has this been approached in the past? Were people nominated? Did they nominate themselves? How has it been done?
In the past, people were nominated by other people on the committee. Yes, on the commission.
And Chair Smith, staff just wanted to make a quick comment and acknowledge that Vice Chair Davis was not here. And if you choose to proceed so, that works as well. We just wanted to make sure that was acknowledged.
I would like to make a suggestion that we consider postponing this item until we have all commissioners present.
And I agree with that because, Commissioner Davis was acting as vice chair. It would probably only be fair to give her the opportunity to be present. Thank you.
Thank you. I will go ahead and make the motion then to postpone the election of officers to another meeting when all commissioners are present.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. The roll call, please.
Vice Chair Linda Davis is absent. Commissioner Ben Brousseau,
Yes.
Commissioner John Griffin,
Yes.
Commissioner Peter Hosmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Courtney Lodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Rose Smith.
Yes,
Motion passes for postponement.
thank you. Do any of the commissioners have announcements?
I have a little announcement. This goes along with Peter. Guys, I'm going to make this really quick. I'm going to start, I guess since I'm the last one on the table here, I'm going to pass this down. and please take notes or whatever you'd like. This is the official layout of the brochure that I worked on with Peter last month. We had a blast working together on this. We're going to meet at AZ88, but we decided to just meet at my house. We wouldn't have gotten anything done if we were at the bar. Nothing would happen. So the way that this is designed then is you'll see this brochure on a rack somewhere, and there'll be town and country and, you know, all the districts. And then there'll be maybe a couple of additional sort of headers on the back, like Old Town Scottsdale. We could do a whole brochure on Old Town Scottsdale. We could do coming soon, you know, what's next for Scottsdale. So the idea here is that we assign each commissioner their own brochure, okay? And that might be town and country. We might ask you to write about that. On this brochure, then you'll see this is the front, this is the back, it's two-sided, right, copied from, and then you fold it kind of specially, but I'm not doing it right here. But it's really cool because it'll give you a little bit of an opportunity to exercise your creative muscles a bit, and then also to update your bio, because we'll leave that on the back as well. So go ahead, take a look. If you hate it, you hate it. Sorry. Let's make some changes and love it, because I think this is a really cool, exciting little endeavor for everybody. A great way for us to get some exposure. Great way to promote Scottsdale as well, especially with our hopefully great tourist season coming up. I think this could be knocked out in the next 6 weeks.
Well, I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
Kudos for
Yeah.
you guys for doing this. I think it's a great idea. And any
Yeah,
way we
thank
can
you.
market our historical preservation endeavors is awesome.
Yep. And the great thing about this, like I said last month, that with using Canva, we have the opportunity to convert anything into a digital file too. So while the printed number may be very small, the actual number of viewers, I think, will be quite high. Yeah,
This is
cool.
Commissioner Hosmer. I think just to tag on to what Ben's saying, one of the things that we discovered being on the commission the last couple of years is that there's actually a lot of people that don't know what's going on in their own historic district. And rather than try to push something in their face, we thought this would be a soft approach to have somebody discover this at the library or on digital media or somewhere and say, oh, I didn't know this. This is really fantastic. Even though the realtors are supposed to say you just bought a home in a historic district, some of them forget, or maybe they were never told. So this is sort of a way to reintroduce what their surroundings are, to get them excited about living in a historic district. Thank you.
So I guess what I'll do then is maybe it's Ben Brusso, Commissioner Brusso here. I'll forward to Jesus the final. I'll just pick do you guys mind if do you have any kind of assign you guys a district? Does it matter? You love them all equally, I'm sure. Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then of course we're using Canva. So we'll have to, I think under my membership, you get free admin or something. So you guys can approve it. You can have the design team approve it as well. It would be really great and key, I think, also to have these uploaded to like the city server or something like where realtors could get them. Because I do think that realtors would really appreciate having, something to have on their table when they start doing open houses and stuff like that. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
I have a question for Peter and for Ben. Have you ever presented our Historical Preservation Commission to Scottsdale leadership?
It's Ben Brusso. No, I have not.
I'm
So
I'm
it's a good
having
idea, though.
lunch with somebody from one of the founders next week. Can I bring it up as a possible topic in the future?
For sure. Absolutely.
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Thank you. Is any other commissioner announcements tonight? We'll look forward to getting our assignments.
I would really just like to congratulate John coming onto the commission. We're glad to have you. And also to have you, Commissioner Smith, chairing the meeting today. I think what's been key all along is to have a lot of dialogue so that we're not only learning ourselves, but we're also helping those that are new and need to understand what we've done the last couple of years with the commission. The outreach that Ben and I are working on, I think, is critical because so many people don't seem to want to adhere. And I think it's partly because they were never told. And we want them to be excited about it, not just take it for granted. And, this is what we do. And I think we have an opportunity to educate, the rest of the public. And we may get more districts created because of the brochures, which would be a great goal. Thank you.
Thank you. That sounds great. And I also love the idea brought up. I think it was at the last meeting with the possibility of having the commissioners do a little field trip around the historic neighborhoods and the ones that are possibly considering. It would be great for all of us to learn that, since we have a few newbies on board here. Is there any future agenda items that anyone wants to discuss? Any other items for tonight?
I now come to think of it, because you've been so good at inspiring my thoughts. I'll keep jabbering. I've always been curious how we get districts excited and deciding to become historic. That doesn't come from the Historic Preservation Commission going out and saying to a neighbor, you should get a district developed for your district here. It's beautiful, it's historic, here's the reasons why. And I don't know where this comes from. And so I'm just curious if Mr. Murillo could help me understand where the inception of some of these districts come from. Is it from somebody that's part of the HOA? Is it from just a homeowner? Because we need to inspire more of that. There's so many downtown buildings in Scottsdale, in Old Town especially, that are historic in nature that are not on the list. And is it inappropriate for us to solicit them and say, we'd like to encourage you to do this? And maybe that'd be some homework for Mr. Murillo to do, and tell us what we can do or what the city can do or is doing that would help get more districts created. Thank you.
Chair Smith and Commissioner Hosmer, staff would definitely enjoy doing some of that research for you. I do know that in trying to answer some of the questions that the commission had posed to staff, especially about the funding and how that came to be, there were several reports and resolutions that I read. And in doing so, I think who we used to have back then, Mr. Don Reserve, who I got the pleasure of working with him his last year here, he did do what he could. You could tell to cheerlead it, but you can tell that the majority of them that were successful had really had a grassroots effort. And it was good to see that it was a joint effort between the city and some of the residents. But yes, I will do some research to see how that ignited, because I know from the reports, I could see how it got to the application stage and how it got to fulfillment and approval by council. But I'll definitely do some research and see whether the application was first submitted, or I should say enacted by staff and then signed on by the applicants, or whether the original application came in from the residents themselves. So I'll definitely do some research for you on that.
Does the zoning department have any say in this, of designated a plot of land to be future historic?
Yeah, Chair Smith and Commissioner Griffin, that is a great question. The answer is yes. And I love the energy and I love the feel. So I don't want to go too far down this road here, but I was here when the Prop 207 waivers were introduced, and that was the how was a new district. And so I think that back then that element not being there encouraged a lot more, because eventually when a project like this moves forward for the actual zoning designation is whether the 207 discussion is going to be had. Is someone going to be able to say that we've inadvertently done something to hurt the value of the property? And again, I don't want to go too far down that road, but the question you pose is important because eventually, in order for this to be solidified and enacted, the Planning Commission, well, first the Historic Preservation Commission obviously would have to support it and move it forward and make a recommendation to the Planning Commission, and then finally by council. So they do play a large role. And again, the first thing that pops into my mind was the difference between then and now.
Okay, Thank you. And Commissioner Griffin will look forward to your experience and former preservation commissions on how to get people excited about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, as an architect, I deal a lot with the new projects with planning and zoning. So that's why I understand, large swath of land, and whether it's an incentive or a program to get them to buy into it. And then because City of Phoenix does similar concepts.
It's exciting. So with no other business on the table, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn for the evening?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Peter Hosmer. Thank you.
Commissioner Griffin, seconds.
Okay, this meeting of January 6, 2022 is now adjourned.